Good evening, all of you, ladies and gentlemen, who are joining online as well as physically for this webinar on the title Supply Chain Strategies on Supply Chain to Mitigate the Impact of COVID-19. I am honored and privileged to be a participant of this important and timely webinar organized by the Supply Chain Logistics and Transport Committee, jointly with the Organization of Professional Associations. This committee is one of the standing committees of the OPA and has been in the forefront in organizing programs focused on supply chain matters. At the very outset, I would like to very warmly welcome the erudite speakers today, Mr. Tusit Kunavarna Surya, Director Procurement and Logistics, CM City Cement Lanka Limited, Mr. Jude Fernando, Managing Director, Hemas Pharmaceuticals Private Limited, Dr. Samantha Ananda, Assistant Secretary, GMOA, Mr. I.G. Pereira, immediate past president of the Institute of Supply and Materials Management, and our own past president, Mr. Ruan Galage, who is playing the important role of the moderator. Also, it is my pleasure to welcome the General Secretary, President-elect, Treasurer, Chairman of the Supply Chain and Logistics Committee, Mr. Gamage, who is also the President of the Institute of Supply Chain and Material Management. It is also my pleasure to welcome all of you, ladies and gentlemen, who are participating in this webinar physically and virtually. Going back to the activities conducted by this committee of the supply chain and logistics, I'm glad to say that they were the first standing committee of OPA who compiled a report with recommendations to the government on supply chain issues at the beginning of the pandemic. This report was submitted to His Excellency the President, and I presume that some of the recommendations made in this report have already been implemented by the relevant authorities. I trust that the outcome of this webinar too would be submitted as proposals to the authorities, and the committee would take necessary action in that regard. Ladies and gentlemen, enjoy the program. Thank you. Over to Mr. Saraj Gamage, the chairman of the Committee of Supply.
Thanks, Engineer Shanta Selnath, President of OPA, General Secretary Mrs. Ruchira Gunasekara, and the members of the table, and all participants joined physically and online. The Supply Chain Logistics and Transport Committee of OPA is mainly focusing the industry-related matters to be discussed and highlighted to the policymakers of the country in professional manner for betterment of the industry and enhance overall productivity. During the pandemic, as President mentioned, the Supply Chain and Logistics Committee was able to present a concept paper to the government for implementation after necessary approvals from the Executive Committee and the Forum of OPA. There are many areas which we have covered in that concept paper, and mainly FMCG, pharmaceuticals, construction materials, fuels, fertilizer, etc. This time, the committee fully concentrated, focused on supply chain and logistics issues due to global pandemic, and also restriction and the controls mainly for imports and how those issues are affecting for different industries. The committee recognized and recommended few eminent characters and industry experts to share with us their knowledge and experience. We have with us today Mr. Ruan Galage, Honorary Past President of OPA, and thanks for your willingness to join with us as the moderator. May I invite past President Mr. Ruan Galage to proceed as per the agenda. Thank you.
Everyone, good evening. On this day, we are going through one of the most difficult periods in our lifetime. In this, the role that has to be played with regard to supply chain is beyond imagination. It is said that we have this famous idiom, an army marches on its stomach. We know that food, shelter, and clothing is very important, one of the basics in life. But now we have to look at medicine and healthcare as well. I have to look back on somewhat on retrospect with regard to the two gentlemen who spoke a few minutes back. One is Mr. Dayashanta Senarath, who basically is our president, and he had been the founder member of the Engineers Council when it was formed. So we had him as our incumbent president as well as a past secretary of the OPA. Then I have to record about Sarat Kamage, the incumbent president of ISMM, the Institute of Supply and Materials Management. He is also the chairman of Supply Chain Logistics and Transport Committee of the OPA. Before being elected as the president of ISMM, he had served in the capacity of BP for 4 continuous years. He presently serves as the Director General Manager of a reputed company, which is in the field of construction and building material for almost 8 decades, St. Anthony's Group of Companies. And to start the proceedings, I will just lay down a few ground rules. Each panelist will have 20 minutes each. Then as we move on, we move into the area of Q&A. This is one of the most vibrant areas that we normally go into in our sessions at OPA. It is unfortunate that we could not have this as a physical event. So making use of the facilities available and the digitalized aspect of it comes into the picture. So the first gentleman who will speak today is none other than Mr. Tusit Gunavarna Surya. Mr. Gunavarna Surya is presently holds a position of Procurement and Logistics Director of INSI Cement, which was originally known as Holcim. We all know the name Holcim, but INSI is somewhat new, but he's the Procurement and Logistics Director. Prior to that, he had served as the Director of Supply Chain of Hema's Consumer, Head of Supply Chain of Onterra brand Lanka, Head of Procurement of GlaxoSmithKline Sri Lanka. Prior to that, he has also been with Holcim as well for a period of 6 years. After that, an early career with MAS. He holds a BSc with honors in Electrical and Electronic Engineering from University of Peradeniya and a Master's in Business Administration from University of Colombo and an MSc in Business Organization Psychology from University of Coventry. He has so many other qualifications. I don't want to spend more time on that. It is my pleasure and privilege to invite Mr. Tusit Gunavarna Surya, the first panelist of today's event, on strategies on supply chain to mitigate the impact of COVID-19. Mr. Tushit Gunavarnasuriya, over to you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Moderator. Ayubowan to the President of OPA, Engineer Shanta Senrath, the Chairman of the Subcommittee, my friend Mr. Sarat Gamage, all the eminent personnel from OPA, and the people who have joined the seminar. So let's look at how exactly this COVID-19 or the coronavirus pandemic is affecting the supply chains, especially in Sri Lanka. And then what are some of the mitigatory strategies that we could adopt to get out of this situation. So if you look at this particular pandemic, the key things that is affecting supply chain is not only the numbers, but how vast the scale of this pandemic is. So it started in one country in China, went into Europe, it came into Asia, came into North America, South America, and Africa. So it's a truly global phenomenon. The second thing from a supply chain perspective is that the uncertainty that creates. Now, there are many disruptions to supply chain operations. For example, it can be an industrial incident like Bhopal, a nuclear incident, or a tsunami. But you exactly know what is the impact that it created on the supply chain and when you can come out of it with a clear plan. But in the case of COVID-19, the pandemic has been raging on, and we have not been able to really predict or to have any certainty as to when we can come out of this. So that's a very key thing which affects the supply chain. So you can see wave after wave, the number of cases have come down, has gone up, deaths have come down, gone up globally. And the only thing that where you can see a certain trend is the vaccination. So you can see Valley Sri Lanka as well. So in this context, it has really impacted a lot of organizations, a lot of business organizations. So if you look at even the biggest companies in the world, you can see 94% of them have supply chain disruptions due to COVID-19. And 75% of these companies in Fortune 1000 have had negative impacts on their businesses due to this. And 55% of them have downgraded the growth outlook. They have already done so. And if you look at the timeline from November 2019, now it's almost been 22 months. And still, we really do not see the end of this pandemic. So if you look at the Sri Lankan context, growth on the expenditure side, also the growth on the production side, which mostly affects both the commodity, the production side, as well as the services in all segments compared to 2019 and even 18. 19, of course, again, we had a very sad incident for Sri Lanka with the East attack. But 2020 onwards, and even if you look at the first half of 2021, you really see the impact that COVID brings in across all segments, across production segments as well. So in this context, what really affects Sri Lanka is, of course, we are an import-driven country. So financial inflows have been insufficient for us to meet the liabilities and the outflows, which has a significant impact in the supply chain, in the material flow, which is linked to the liquidity of our organizations, as well as the banks and the country. So you can clearly see while the imports have reduced, exports too have been impacted. So still, it's still a negative scenario. And also from a supply chain perspective, the impact it has had on people. Now, in the end, all these people are related to a certain supply chain. They may be consumers, they may be in the manufacturing function, they may be in the logistics function or in the supply chain, they may be providing support services, but the people of Sri Lanka have got affected because of this. So clearly, only 2% of the people or households have their income increased during this last 12 months period. 7% have totally lost their income. 34% more or less not changed household income. So you can understand who are the people here, mostly the government servants who have not directly got impacted in the income due to this. And then 57% mostly private sector, mostly daily wage earners, and certain organizations, for example, where you get overtime has been reduced, leave pay has been reduced. Some organizations have had to reduce the basic salary as well. So there's a decline in household income in 57% of household in Sri Lanka. So you can clearly see the impact that this brings onto your supply chain. And the recovery. Now, there are different theories, there are different models how we can recover, whether it's a V-shaped recovery, whether it's a U-shaped recovery, or whether it's a Nike swoosh-shaped recovery. And so many different discussions are happening. But what we see even today, with interprovincial travel restrictions getting further strengthened and public transportation being stopped today according to the new guidelines, that we are still not out of this. And definitely we are not able to predict when we will be able to recover, or whether we will ever get back to the pre-COVID situation, or whether this new normal in COVID-19, post-COVID-19, will take a very long time to recover. Certainly, it looks like that. So in that context, how do we look at the future and how do we set up our supply chain? So this is one of the outlooks, one of the perspectives available in Sri Lanka with the COVID pandemic. This is done by the Ministry of Finance and Central Bank of Sri Lanka together with the World Bank. What is the outlook looking like? So you can clearly see the GDP, the degrowth last year, and a potential recovery, but we are more or less not even getting back to the 2019 level with this bouncing back, and clearly the slower growth for the outer years. But we will never really know how it will really develop. But what also you can see is that the inflation is going up. FDIs, the outlook is not that good, and the fiscal balance and the debt. So there are some key parameters, macroeconomic conditions, which are badly affected due to COVID-19. However, from a supply chain perspective, we have seen that during this pandemic, that many organizations had the opportunity to be more lean, to be more agile, to reform their supply chain. So this is an opportunity for us in the supply chain community, or even if you are in a business organization or in a government organization, or you're having your own business, an entrepreneur, this is an opportunity to relook at the supply chain. First thing that you need to understand about supply chain when it comes to COVID-19 is the supply demand shock. Because the essence of supply chain is to match demand and supply. So COVID-19, because of the reasons that I mentioned earlier, brings in many shocks into the supply chain across all 4 functions in supply chain, which is planning, sourcing, manufacturing, and delivery. So while certain industries are affected more compared to others, for example, if you look at tourism, air transportation, entertainment, hospitality, these sectors are really negatively affected. But if you look at healthcare, online businesses, IT services, they have had very good demand for these services. So different industries have had different types of demand supply scenarios. So from your perspective, for your industry, for your business, first you need to understand what exactly are the demand supply shocks that this COVID-19 has brought in for you to decide on the supply chain strategies that you can adopt. So if you look at supply shock, labor supply shock has been a key one. Every day, probably if you are testing for PCRs or RAT tests or whatever for COVID, there are some people being detected as positive, and then they're out of your workforce. And not everybody can work from home. There are certain jobs that you have to be in the field. If you're in the sales function, if you're in the manufacturing function, you have to be in the shop floor. So not everybody can work from home. So definitely there's a huge labor supply shock. Then material supply shock, because of the nature of the pandemic, which is truly global and affecting different countries. A lot of our imports are coming from China, from India, from Europe, right? So when these countries are affected, it clearly has a material supply shock into our supply chain. So certain suppliers are closed. There are certain freight restrictions. There are certain delays with the regulatory approval for all that. Supply shocks are there. Then recently, we have had a lot of financing and payment issues. I will tell you a few workarounds for this. And then government policy decisions as well. For example, the chemical fertilizers. Government took a policy decision not to import, and then to go with organic fertilizers. So there are many policy decisions like that where it has a direct impact on the supply chain. And similarly, if you look at the demand side, government health regulations, consumer income, consumer likings has a major impact on the supply chain. So where your industry is in this supply shock and demand shock can be mapped, and it will help you to quantify the supply chain strategies that you need to adopt. So the immediate things that you need to focus on in setting your supply chain strategy to overcome the current situation. First, you need to understand the demand impact specific to your business. Certain businesses, like I mentioned, would have a double demand. Certain businesses may not have any demand. So you need to understand that. Then in the short term, for you to bring down your fixed cost and the variable cost, you need to try to match this demand and supply. Try to synchronize as much as possible. For example, if you are running 6 factories currently, if there's reduced demand, you might have to shut down 2 for the moment temporarily. Or if you're having increased demand, you might have to go for contract manufacturing. So that's one part. Then you need to prepare for potential channel shifts, which means that traditional channels, the retail channels may not work, but you may have to have online portals, or you need to get onto other online sites. You need to work on that part. Then you will have to have enhanced workforce labor planning for your supply chain to operate. Need to have backup plans. If certain people are testing positive, then you know that you have to take out the entire C1 list, operate in a bubble, etc. You have to look at the tier 1 suppliers mostly, but if there are extended supply chains, you need to look at beyond that, create visibility, try to understand alternative sources. For example, India went through a very rough patch. Then we had to shift into other countries temporarily to get similar supplies. So you need to be well aware of your alternative sources, alternative materials, etc. You will have to look at your inventory policy and planning parameters. For many years, we were talking about inventory optimization, network optimization, cutting down on inventory, but it might not work for you in this current situation because of the volatility, because of the demand supply shocks in the supply chain. You might have to have a higher inventory policy, higher inventory buffer. Inbound material visibility, try to create visibility with your suppliers, with your shipping agent, with your liner, etc. Focus on production scheduling more, be flexible, be agile. Evaluate alternative outbound logistics options. So if you are shipping through distributors might not be able to take either the credit risk, or in the current context may not be accessible if they are in shutdown or lockdown areas. Right now in Sri Lanka at the moment, there are no lockdown areas, but these things you may need to cater. Then it's very important to have kind of scenario planning, what you call either emergency response or your business continuity plans ready so that you can adapt. Now, doing all this, you need to realize that this may and definitely involve trade-offs. So you may not be able to produce all the items that you regularly or usually produce. Then you will need to trade off. Usually this is based on the profitability of the medium term and the prospects for the long term. You might have to select which customers to serve, which customers that you cannot cater right now. So definitely you have to identify the trades-off for your business. And specific things that you need to watch out for is, of course, health. So take all the precautions for your team. For example, we have mandated that without the vaccination, that people are not able to work in our factories. For one example, then you have this hand washing, the mask wearing, the social distancing, etc. Have all that, especially if external people, your customers are coming to pick up, etc. Then have the bubbles created and try to operate these things. And also, what most of the people have experienced substandard quality inputs, because our suppliers also have gone through different challenges during the COVID period, and sometimes they tend to ship out whatever they have. Certain quality parameters have been missed. We can do it in our organization also, so watch out for that. Additional expenses. Now, there are a lot of additional expenses, for example, testing people using PCR tests, or then providing transportation facilities for them to come into your office, etc. There will be additional cost to operate your supply chain in this time, but please look at how you can overcome this. Then, of course, you have to expect unforeseen delays. Focus on your cost and cash. Look at the cash flow, because what is happening right now is you might be producing and selling a lot, but look at the collection also, because customers, due to various reasons, not having people in your office to authorize, or due to difficulties in selling, there is an cash flow issue. So please look after that. Some short-term things that you can do to overcome some of the challenges currently in Sri Lanka. For example, we face a lot of regulatory delays in both imports and exports, customs, ports, etc. As much as possible, go for online approvals and online payments. Those systems work and you can use this. There's a issue with USD liquidity, getting foreign currency to open LCs. So if you are working on open accounts, or if you are working on documentary credit, right now there's an issue. So as much as possible, shift to LCs. And even if you can't get, for example, US dollars, now the local government banks like People Bank, they accept to establish yuan LCs, especially for imports from countries like China, Hong Kong, Taiwan, where a lot of our imports are coming. There's better liquidity for Chinese yuan compared to the US dollar. Then permanent terms, you can look at, if you are currently bringing on at site LCs, look at usance LCs and different methodologies. And in the worst case scenario, there are certain mechanisms to do offshore payments as well, where you can get dollars in Singapore and you can sell or you can settle the payment in rupees in Sri Lanka. There are agents who are operating. Of course, the rates, conversion rates, the rupee rates that you get are pretty high. But in a survival situation, you might look at these options. High freight charges for both for container and bulk cargo. So we need to look at alternative options. For example, we were importing dry bulk cargo like clinker for cement industry, and it went up 300%. So container cargo, in contrast, went only up by 150%. So we have done some changes in freight. We have moved to a lesser cost option. Interprovincial travel restrictions, if these are affecting your employees, and if it's affecting your distribution, then of course you can present your case. If you are a BOI company, or even if you are a local manufacturer, you can present your case to the DG Health and then get an approval, which you can produce to the police stations or checking when you go in from district to district or province to province. Try to have bubbles in your operation. Move from pickup to delivered if necessary. For example, to prevent people coming into your factories to your offices, you can go to them instead. So these are some of short-term immediate measures that you can do. From a long-term or medium-term perspective, there are two things that I would recommend, because we never know when this will end. So build your demand forecasting capability. Go for digital transformation technologies as much as possible, IoT, blockchain, etc., and give that visibility. And I'll take just a few minutes to talk about the construction industry. So with this COVID pandemic, and even before that, with the exchange rate impact that we're having, clearly you see that the cost in the construction industry are going up. So you can, this is for a very basic house. This is for a modern house. So if you look at a basic house, 20% YOI increase. We look at a modern house, almost 300% increase. So from around 4,000 rupees per square feet, now we are looking at 8,000 rupees per square feet. And even that is going up. When you look at the entire setup of construction, so this is where, as a country, we are really depending on imports a lot. And that has an impact on the construction industry supply chain as well as the cost of construction. So what I was showing you earlier is of course a house, but even if you look at industrial and infrastructure development, there are similar trends. So what is supplied locally, at least for domestic or retail construction, is of course the labor, then things like bricks and sand, but everything else more or less has been on an import dependent policy. And now government has restricted certain imports, for example tiles. And because of that demand supply scenario, you have seen that even the domestic tile prices have gone up, right? So clearly you can see across key categories in the building material space, in the supply chain, have been a very clear increases from within the last 5 years, and this especially comes during the last year. So in the long term, what you need to do is to recalibrate your supply chain. We have been taking a cost optimization, cash optimization view. We need to change that with COVID right now. Then you can see clearly a government policy towards import substitution, more localization, national or sovereign supply chains. So value addition, see where you can do more value addition within Sri Lanka and try to reduce the dependency on imports, because current situation, even if the dollar is floated, it's going to impact the cost to the consumer, and it's going to impact the cost to the businesses as well. And as the Sri Lankan government and companies, there are two things that we need to do and that we need to lobby the government to do. One is, of course, as much as possible from our side, go for local value addition in the supply chain. And to do that, it's essential that we have the required policy and the infrastructure ready, not only for the local supply chains, but for the global supply chains to come into Sri Lanka. So that's what I had to share. And we'll take the Q&A at the end of the session as the panel. So over to you, Mr. Moderator.
Thank you, Mr. Gunavarna Surya. That was quite revealing presentation you made. A pandemic originates in Wuhan, China, and goes around globally. A 22-month ordeal. And we have a country, Sri Lanka, $22 billion worth of imports versus 12 billion worth of exports. So we have a serious balance of payment problem. As well as in this scenario, we have issues with the opening of initiation of letters of credit, as well as with the freight rates going up, the costs are going up, as well as the exchange rate. Then, as Mr. Gunavarna Surya said very emphatically, that opportunity to revisit and relook at all businesses. Supply chain, supply shocks versus demand shocks. The bullwhip effect, navigate disruptions, focus on costs and cash, and look at import substitution. Maybe we are going into a different era where Sri Lanka can go back to our historical achievements long years back. And one more thing for the participants, the chat box is open. You can forward your questions to the chat box. And so we will do our level best to look into your issues as well. Now we have another specialist in this field, Mr. Jude Fernando, who has joined Hemas Pharmaceuticals in August 2020. Prior to rejoining Hemas, he served as the Director, Chief Executive Officer of Janashakti Insurance He brings with him over 26 years of experience. And he had been Director CEO of Janashakti Insurance, Director CEO of Kotmale Holdings, and Executive Director and Sales and Distribution for Cargill's manufacturing brands. And he has also served in the boards of Junamis Capital PLC, Kelsey Homes, and First Capital Holdings. Mr. Jude Fernando held the position of Director Supply Chain of Hemas Manufacturing prior to taking over the role of Director CEO post at Kotmale PLC in 2008. He's an accountant by profession. And he holds an MBA from the University of Wales and is a fellow member of the Chartered Institute of Management Accountant, a Chartered Global Management Accountant, and a fellow member of the Association of Certified Chartered Accountants, UK, and a member of the Chartered Institute of Marketing. Quite a gamut of qualifications. It's my pleasure to invite Mr. Jude Fernando to present his view on strategies on supply chain to mitigate the impact of COVID-19. Mr. Jude Fernando, over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Galage, for that lovely introduction. Good morning, good evening, everyone. I want you. I must say I'm extremely privileged and honored to be invited for this webinar. Truly a timely topic indeed. There's no doubt about this important topic. And I want to thank and congratulate the OPA and its president, Mr. Shanta, and the committee for organizing a webinar on such relevance. And of course, Sarat Gamage, the vice president of OPA and the president of ISMM, whom I have known for a long period of time, for inviting me for this webinar. Now, before I start my presentation, I would like to ask a question from the audience. Of course, you know, it would have been fantastic if this was a physical meeting, but nevertheless, I would like to pose this question at all of you all. You know, all of you are, I think about 138 number is in participating on today's presentation on webinar. All of you work in at one vertical or the other in the entire supply chain. How many of you actually work with an understanding, knowledge, and more importantly, the pride that the functions that you do bring serious competitive advantage to your organization? Now, of course, I'm not going to wait till the feed. Okay. Let me off my video. Yeah, okay. So, I mean, that competitive advantage could come in the form of cost, low cost, either through the procurement or through production, or it could be through high quality, speed to the market, or extremely high service standards, or so on and so forth. But, you know, let me assure you, because most of us who are in the supply chain don't really think that, you know, the functions that we do actually make a huge impact and bring in a competitive advantage to the business that you do, because all we see is a brand. And, you know, you guys are the real wheels within that brand who bring that competitive advantage. Of course, there are technically competitive advantage through technical aspects. Those are different. But by and large, most of the organization, their competitive advantage comes because of the work that you do. I also want to say that, you know, this is one function that give you lifelong learning. I had the privilege of managing end-to-end supply chain at the place that I work, from planning to procurement to production to warehouse and delivery. But I can say that I had the best life learning that I got, mainly because of the association from production flow members to the warehousing and delivery members, from different level of organizations, many cross-functional, especially from sales, branding and finance, and you know, with other stakeholders, suppliers, shipping agents, banks, regulators, government agencies, so on and so forth. Those learning that comes as a result of the functions that you do in the supply chain, I can assure you, goes a long way. That will make you, not only you contribute immensely for the business that you work for, but also make you a well-rounded professional and individual, mainly because of the interaction that you have. that, I'm going to share my presentation and start. Let me share my presentation. I trust all of you can see my presentation. I believe it's visible. If not, please let me know, someone. Okay, so thanks. My presentation is on strategies on supply chain to mitigate the impact of COVID-19, but specifically it's on the farmer perspective. Now you are seeing on the screen accessibility, affordability through agility. Now those are the two areas which is extremely relevant for the functions that we do. Accessibility of medicine, the affordability, because medicine is something that, irrespective of whether you are rich or poor, whether you are old or young or child, it is something. So that accessibility and affordability is something which is extremely important in our business. And of course, agility, I'll explain that part as we go along. But let me first take you through what does supply chain, how does it look like in a pharmaceutical business. First is, of course, you have, by and large, if you look at our industry, Sri Lanka produce about 10% or 12% of the requirement of medicine. Everything else is imported in the form of product. So that's why I use the words principles here. And then ours is a regulated business. Now, we cannot get anything to this country unless the NMRA, which is our regulator, approves. Now, I won't go into details of regulatory process, but of course, every way from a product registration to even the registration of a site which the products are manufactured, import license, there are a whole heap of controls that is around this business for obvious reason, including being price control. So NMRA is the first regulator that comes in. Once those approval, of course, the rest of the things follows the pretty normal way it is done. You have, you bring the stuff from air or sea, it goes to a factory or pretty much a warehouse. As I said, bulk of the pharmaceuticals in this country comes in the form of a finished product. And then there are different channels on these products goes into the market. One is the normal channel that most of in the business industry that you work with is having the distributor channel. Then ours is specific, which is about the public hospital and of course the private institutions and the hospitals. And recent some past, of course, this online platform has really taken off. And how does it get to the end user? If it is online performance, last mile delivery will get it up to the end user. And which is hospitals and private hospitals, they all directly goes to the end user, which is the patient, or sometimes through the pharmacy network. And of course, the distributors, they go through the pharmacy, distributor to pharmacy, and pharmacy products find its way to the end user, in this case, pharmacy, through in this case the patient through the pharmacies. Now, what does success means in supply chain to a pharma business? Well, I would say it's pretty much the same in this presentation. What you see in the screen is not very different to what you heard. There are, of course, certain factors which are very common, like the service standards, safety to the products, the assets, and the people, the inequality. And what is specific for us is obviously compliance aspect, because not only us, whoever the industry that is in more onto regulated industries have those aspects. The rest, things like the managing supply chain costs, maintaining the service costs at a lowest level, balancing between demand and supply, having the optimum inventory. Those are the success factors of the supply chain of pharma, as much as to a great extent many other industry. Now these things, of course, it's very easy to see that, summarize in a one slide. We all know who are in the supply chain, how challenging it is to meet these success factors. Irrespective of this industry you are in, irrespective of the vertical in the supply chain you are in, these are challenging. And of course, people, some of you who are maybe having work in one vertical of the supply chain, maybe multiple. Some you probably will be handling the end-to-end verticals, and those who are handling much larger responsibilities, where of course you must be swimming with issues, mundane day-to-day operational issues in managing these critical success factors in supply chain. So that is the life prior. But then something happened in March 2020. COVID came and, make us total different the way we do, something that we have never, ever experienced in our lifetime. And everything got disrupted. And I think this also gives us a fantastic learning about how prepared we were. Because I mean, as how prepared we were as a nation, how prepared we were as an organization, and how prepared we were as individuals. Why I say that is, this issue started way back in 2019 in China. And it was obvious that it's going to cross borders and come to every single country. But, until the lockdown took place, we were actually didn't really take necessary precautions. I think this has given us a lot of learning about how an organization and how as an individuals need to see, what is coming and be ready for those things, because without finding all of a sudden, like what we faced in March 2020, when lockdown happens, we were not sure how do we move forward. So this is what in our industry, a lot of disruption took place. Let me take this. In our industry also, a lot of disruption took place. Let me summarize some of the disruptions that took place immediately after the lockdown, in first lockdown, and of course, how we responded to that. One is restriction to access customers. Now, I'm talking about now all of us are, pretty after almost 15, 16 months of experiencing this, we know what to do, what not to do, that whole, but I'm talking about the very first time when the country was closed down, locked down. People were scared. We were grappling with fear. None of us went out of the house, but, our sales guy had to go because, they can't, of course, we were declared essential service, but nevertheless, the entire country was closed. But these guys, ours was within 48 hours of closure, our sales guys started to hit the road back again. Why? How did that happen? Because they had a purpose, sense of purpose in the job that they do. They realized that, the job that I do it saves lives. If I don't ensure that the products are much needed medicines are available out in the market, people are going to die of other sicknesses. So, and that sense of purpose resulted in our guys going out there, market out to the park, and of course with the distribution team, that gave the lead to the rest of the industry also to follow. The other disruption that we faced is difficulty in placing pharmacy orders. Now, what happened was some of the distributors actually didn't want to open their warehouse. Naturally, they were worried, they were scared. So they said, no, I'm not going to open mine. So we all know Sri Lanka works in a distribution method where, regions are demarcated with one distributor. And then that's how it works. And we had the same problem. And when they said, no, I'm sorry, I can't open, we had a problem. How did you overcome? We had the agility in the distribution network. So what we did was immediately, when one distributor said he can't, we actually got this other distributor to manage that region. Now, it's easy to say, but we all know the credit terms, the invoicing system, collection. They have a nightmare when somebody else come and start doing business in somebody else's region. But our agility in our distribution network enabled to do that. And of course, digitalization helped the process big way. Warehouse disruption to the warehouse. Now, our core warehouse is coming from Vattal area. We all know that many bubbles started in that area, and how we manage is purely because of the forming cross-functional teams. We move from our traditional basis of working to roster basis of working, and more importantly, I think this one of the key things that we actually were a success for our organization was empowering the smaller teams to take decisions and move. So we basically cut off the hierarchical structure. The smaller teams were empowered to take decisions, and that worked beautifully for the organization to operate smoothly. Disruption to supply chain and inventory. Of course, I mean, that is all of us faced during the first and the second wave of this lockdowns. And, having a greater understanding with the supply, we have deal with suppliers across the globe, from the region to Europe to everywhere. And, having that understanding gave us that edge to ensure that, mutual understanding helped us to manage those disruptions. And of course, data-driven forecasting models helped immensely, because that gave us the ability to understand the changes, impact of the changes, and through that we managed our inventory and supplies quite well. General issues of disruption. Everything, whether it's support to the banks, to internal, everything was not happening the way it used to happen. And we managed it purely because of the collaborative effort we had with all. And of course, more importantly, the relationship that we have been having with these partners. All the back office, it got disrupted. Of course, working from home was, something that all of us are used to today. But when for the first time it was something new to us. But, we managed to get it that digital enablement was done. And of course, again, empowerment of smaller terms, entire backward, rather than working on the hierarchy of management, which was the way it was managed. We gave the empowerment for people, so that enabled the organization to run smoothly, without going into traditional approval processes and things like that. And exchange rate fluctuation, with that be something we all face. Of course, there's not very little you can do about it. So we went on the basis of cost management to ensure that the impact of that is mitigated. In our business, it's very big. And of course, one of the biggest concerns was the safety and well-being of employees. So first thing that we did was, establish safety protocols, and it was implemented so well. And in fact, it went to the extent of taking disciplinary action if the protocols were not practiced. So that, and also we make people self-responsible towards them, their families, and their colleagues, and the society that they were. I think that message helped us to ensure that we actually manage the entire period without too many of our people actually getting impacted. So that was how we manage. But where do we go? The bad news is the world is nowhere near the end of the COVID pandemic. So some of the measurements that we have taken is no longer going to be temporary one. We need to, COVID is here to stay. That's a fact. Whether it's 3 years, 4 years, 5 years, 10 years is everyone's guess, but surely it's not going to run away in 12 months. So we need to kind of adjust ourselves that reality. Now, what are these impact of COVID in our supply chain? One is restriction to continue to disrupt the logistic operation. That is bound to happen. Even today we hear that all of a sudden, interprovincial stuff. So there are such disruption will continue to happen, and our logistics operations going to get impacted. Uncertain lead times. Due to many reasons, we have experienced that shipping timelines getting messed up. All that will be a part of our life. Then reduced manpower, mainly due to health and other legal restrictions. Social distancing, not being able. There are a lot of restrictions, and we can expect a lot more to come in the time, and that will reduce the manpower. Uncertain supplies, mainly from the areas, we see that countries that declares okay, 2 months later goes to a lockdown. So this dynamism is going to be there. So it's getting some uncertainty of supplies, irrespective of whether it's a highly developed country or not so developed country, will remain to be the same. And of course, we will have fluctuation demand. I'm sure all our organizations, for many reasons, it could be due to panic buy. It could be due to maybe some of your competitors now having issues with their supply chain, and as a result, product going out of stock. As a result, that demand comes to you. Many reasons, but certainly there'll be demand patterns going to fluctuate heavily. And anyway, in general, there'll be disruption to our operations. So how do we manage these disruption? There are, I look at it from the point of view of what do we do now so that we we kind of manage the situation, and then I move on to say, how do we organize in our structural organization going forward, knowing that this is a reality that we are compelled to and bound to live in, structuring ourselves in a bit of a much longer term. One important thing in the immediate we need to do is to create a cross-functional team to coordinate supply chain risk and mitigate the strategy. Now, what do I mean by that? We all our organizations are structured into certain verticals, departments, and there are flow of operation, flow of document, flow of decision-making, approvals. Now, those traditional way of doing things, if that continue to happen, we are going to desperately fail as an organization. This time, that cross-functional team come together with authority and authority to take decisions, and understand that based on the changes that we see in the supply chain it doesn't come with any notice. Today, in the morning you hear something, in the evening you hear something totally contradictory different. So that's the dynamism that in week and changes that comes our way. If you are to do that, our organization also need to be structured as a cross function so that decision can be made much faster. It's extremely important in today's says to work on scenario, best case scenario, worst case scenario, and have the plans B's and ready in case to press the button and move on that direction if that eventuality is to materialize for some reason or the other. And because we know that the standard way of things happening is too much of a luxury to expect in the modern world. With the COVID hit world, changes are bound to happen. They are happening so rapidly, and we need to have these scenarios in place in order to manage them. Of course, depending on the region, depending on the circumstances, many reasons, factors, if required, you will have to have additional buffer stocks also, but I'll come back to that later. And of course, especially where the authorities and the regulations are involved, proper coordination is absolutely essential, because they themselves go through a lot of operational issues, lockdown, closure, people don't come to work. Some of those things are not properly structured for an environment of this nature. So proper coordination with those authorities also is extremely important, and having a relationship to make things to smoothly operate those things. And of course, explore because a classic example is the no longer supply chain guys, you're confined to your operation in your country or department. If you got to have a much larger vision, you must know all if you are countries, what's on earth is happening on those, and you just, for example, what we saw in India is a classic example. Can you hear me?
Please go ahead.
Yeah. Okay, give me a minute. I lost my presentation for whatever the reason. Is my screen visible?
Screen is visible. It's on gaining immediate relief.
Sorry?
It's on gaining immediate relief. That's that's what is on the screen.
Okay, give me a minute. Some technical issues. I'm sorry about it.
If there's a technical glitch, go ahead on your own. I think your voice is good enough. We hear it loud and clear, and it's more than adequate under the circumstances.
All right. Okay, let me load my presenter. Give me a minute, please. Sorry about this.
No worries.
Okay, is it seen now?
No. Oh, now it's on. Gaining immediate relief.
Right. Okay, fine. Okay, so let me quickly, now that I lost a bit of time. So, and of course, you know, I will move on to the long term. I'll move on to the things that we need to do. These are the, I mean, some of the stuff that I discussed earlier was this, the measurements that need to be taken in the medium term, but in the long term, since the COVID here is here to stay, we need to structure ourselves differently and, you know, ensure that we are ready as an organization to move. One is on this working capital management. Now, I cannot stress enough about the need and the importance of using advanced analytics in understanding the supply chain and how they, and especially in the inventory management. You know, we started using that, you know, the amount of how the analytics can help your supply in streamlining and making your supply chain efficient is enormous. So that's something that you all really need to look at. And of course, you know, we always heard this story, cash is king. It is not now it is relevant than ever before. You have a kitty of cash and you need to, you know, if you if you have a unwanted buff inventory, then of course your cash availability for other operations is going to get restricted and limited. So managing in your cash is absolutely essential stuff, and that's where balancing the needs of the with the cash between inventory and other resources is something that need to be looked into. And of course, the important thing is about the KPIs. You know, good old days, our KPIs on, for example, factory was capacity utilization, longer runs, lower unit cost. Those KPIs may no longer be valid in the modern world. That's organization really need to ask the question, what are the KPIs that we need to go after, moving away from the KPIs that was considered as important because due to the changing environments to still give an organization the competitive advantage. On terms of planning, that's another extremely important one, planning capabilities. You know, digitalization of planning session is absolutely essential again. You know, digital, that will give you the agility that is required in terms of scenario planning. So advanced methods through digital is important on planning. And one other important area to look into is the fact of the skill, the knowledge of the planning team. Now you may say, you know, I have teams, they have been doing for X number of years, they are the masters of the game. No doubt about all the respect for them, all that. But today, with the changing and the dynamic world that we are living in due to COVID, the skill, the knowledge, the tools that they use going to be far more different to what they do. So they need to be equipped with the required knowledge. They need to be equipped with the training and the tools that are required to manage the challenges that we have. The other one is to have the visibility on the supply chain end to end. You know, again, I mean, these are again a lot to do with the advanced technology where you have to have a total visibility so that if there is a disruption in any of the verticals in the supply chain, quick decisions can be taken to mitigate the impact of that issue. And of course, you know, the people need to be mindful of the emerging issues because, as I said earlier, changes and the challenges that comes our way doesn't come with a lot of notice. It happens immediately. And unless the supply chain people are fully aware of what is happening in there from one end to the other, from the time the orders are placed, or actually even from the sales point of view to until delivery, that the entire chain, they need to be aware of what's happening. Then only they can take the timely decision. Of course, the last other one is about the supply management. Cutting down the responsive time is important, and that can only happen. We are re-looking at our processes and say, what are, you know, there were earlier, we were structured from department to department. There are a whole lot of nice structures that we had in organization. Now it's time to ask yourself, are these processes relevant in the new world, and is there any processes those are non-adding value, and how many of them need to be taken out? Digitalization, I keep emphasizing on that, and of course, again, the last one is evaluating the geographical impact of those supplies that you have and taking adequate precautions to manage the implications. The other one is the e-commerce. Will not spend so much of time on this. Of course, it's important to understand that world is changing, irrespective of which industry you are in. Digital e-commerce going to take over. Of course, it's not going to replace the traditional way of doing business, but it is an emerging platform. Unless your presence is there, you're going to lose out a lot on that. So that's something that need to be done. And if you have to do that, you need to ensure that your supply chain is geared to order, because existing supply chain will not necessarily be able to cater to the e-commerce platforms that you have to. I mean, see, e-commerce need to be looked at not necessarily from the term of sales, but also as a duty. I mean, imagine, yes, take a very simple one, adult diaper, absolute simple one. But imagine if due to lockdown, due to curfew, due to whatever the reason, if a person can't have that, imagine the product problem that person has to face through. But if it is available in a digital, of course, you know that all solutions can always be. So it's not, as I said, necessarily about generating sales, but it's also need to be looked at in terms of a responsibility. The last, so if you look at learnings, supply chain, critical success when supply chain has not changed. There are factors that are unnegotiable: quality, safety, compliance are absolute essential. Those are what I would say gold standards. That's why I marked in that color. Other aspects, you will work around them in order to, suit the organization and get to the organization. So if I'm to summarize, in the world where changes are so frequent, disruptions is so frequent, if you want to be a winning organization, agility is the number one. How agile you are as an organization will determine how successful you are. Second, the digitalization, not only sales, not only supply chain, in wherever there's an opportunity for digitalization in the organization, that certainly need to be looked into. That is the future. Empowered and decentralized decision making. We have to break into the structured hierarchies. You have to ensure that the people there are smaller teams who are empowered to take decision, and they have the best in mind to take the organization. Traditional structures need to move out. Or the people need to have a reason, purpose for what they're coming. I mean, put it this way. There are many reasons why someone need not to come to work or cannot do the job. There are also, if you are a purpose behind what you do, there are many reasons why that person will come to work and will do the job. If you are purpose-driven, organizations will move forward. One last important thing that I say, this is something a lot of people forget and do ignore to a great extent: alignment between the board and the management. And now that is a responsibility of the directors in charge of the supply chain. If there's a misalignment between the board and the management, management take all the decision, and the board at the board meeting change everything because they are worried, they look at from a different perspective what they used to do in the past. So unless there is a perfect alignment, all the good strategies that you work after the board meeting will end up being changed because of decision taken that. And of course, I cannot emphasize the importance of stronger partnerships. So that brings me to the end of my presentation. Sorry about the bit of technical hiccup that happened in between, and thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Jude Fernando, for a lovely presentation, a timely presentation, which matters to us in no uncertain terms. We are sorry at the beginning, for a few moments we lost your picture, but now we know how handsome you are. Now, it was said that 10% of the medicines are locally manufactured. That means 90% is imported. And medicines play a critical role at present in this country. And disruptions due to lockdowns, establishing new safety protocols. More than anything, the phrase, a sense of purpose. Thank you, you and your team and the pharmaceutical fraternity for the outstanding services rendered. You said about KPIs. We need new normal KPIs in the future. Let's look forward to that. Thank you very much, Mr. Jude Fernando. Once again, it has been lovely listening to you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Arogya Paramalabha, Santutti Paramang Dana. health is wealth. Nirogakama utum labhyai. And it's my pleasure to invite who is in the forefront of the battle of battling COVID-19, Dr. Samantha Ananda, always smiling face that whenever I see him, he has one of the most widest smiles wherever he is, whatever he's doing. He is an international member of the Royal College of General Practitioners, Registrar in Family Medicine, Assistant Secretary, Government Medical Officers Association, Vice President of the Professionals National Vice President of Professionals National Front. Dr. Samantha Fernando is qualified. He's a MD, MCGP, MRCGP, MSc in Community Medicine. It's my pleasure to invite Dr. Samantha Ananda to make his presentation on the webinar on strategies on supply chain to mitigate the impact of COVID-19. Mr. Samantha Ananda.
Yes.
Samantha.
Thank you very much for your kind introduction. We always meet and share our views, and you are not a new person for us. You are also one of our team members who might have fought for Sri Lanka. So you must be remembering your young ages when you see us. I hope so.
Of course. Thank you.
So I would like to say good evening to everyone, and I would like to thank OPA, the president and the secretary, of course, to Mr. Sarat Gamage, the chairman of the Supply Chain Transport and Logistic Committee, for inviting and also for organizing such a valuable seminar today when the country is in need of discussions as to discuss all these things, and where the professionals need to be more involved and more contributed in a situation where the country is in a crisis. I don't know whether I have used the correct word, but if we talk from the people's perspectives, what is working in the mind of the general public is a bit of a crisis situation. So, however, I would like to come to the topic starting from Wuhan. I know it is a topic about logistic management and mitigations, but as a doctor and a person and an organization that we have involved much in this hello. Okay. Sorry for the interruption. We have been involved in this process for a long time, and therefore, just 1 second, hold on my video. Extremely sorry for the interruption. It's basically a problem with my net connection. Hope I can start it again. Can you all hear me? I'm sorry about it.
Yeah, most certainly we can hear you
Yes.
loud and clear.
Yeah, so I will start from Wuhan itself. Like, before we go into the real topic, I think it's my duty to give you all the overview of the current situation and, starting from the history and to give some idea about the future as well, so that you all can manage. I mean, the people who are involved in the supply chain can manage and strategize their future activities for the betterment of the country as well as the industries. So as we all know, it started in Wuhan, and in 2020, WHO declared about this COVID pandemic by January 2027. We found a Chinese tourist, you all can remember. And by March 11, WHO declared COVID-19 as a pandemic. That is a decisive point because, when WHO was taking a long time to declare it as a pandemic, and declaring a pandemic might have changed the entire supply chain, the entire strategies and the things that world have been planned to do in future has changed, and not only the industries, also the services were dramatically affected with this new COVID virus, and also stating it as a pandemic has made international concern, international shock situation, which has greatly affected the supply chain. We had to impose curfew in March, and then by October 2020, we had to face the second wave. Hope that all of you all can remember, in the first wave, we got panic and we had to close the whole country, lockdown situation. It's a curfew basically. And then second wave, we were bit ready for that. We had some idea about it, but the cases went over 10,000 by October 30. By December, we had to declare the 200 number of deaths, which make a shocking wave among the country. And then by January, we were able to start our vaccination. The workforce vaccinations, frontliners were started first, starting from the health sector. By April 15, the third wave came. Why I mention these things? Just to say that the virus is behaving differently than many viruses that encountered in our life. This virus dramatically changes. It goes into strain to strain, and usually we have seen viruses when they develop new strains. Usually the strains, the infectivity as well as the virulence decreases. But unfortunately, the COVID virus virulency as well as the effect on the human health is being increased. Now we are talking about the Delta wave. We never know, Delta variant, we never know what type of variants will emerge and their impact on the human being and the activities of daily living, which also have a greater impact on supply chain. So April 15th, the third wave started. By April 24, total cases were we passed 100,000 mark, which was bit of a made the country to become bit panic. And then by April 29, the New Year cluster was formulated. We as organization repeatedly warned about this New Year cluster, but unfortunately the country was not ready to listen to us. well, from the political perspective as well as from the general public, because at that time the impression among the country was, because the vaccination was started, the country is safe. But that was not the truth, that was not the fact. However, people behaved very leisurely, and therefore the New Year cluster started. We hope that that is where everything started. We had no control after that. Gradually, the number of deaths, the case fertility rates were increasing, which passed 1,000. We never thought that we will have that much of case fertility rates. And this, I just wanted to summarize things. This is for the date of 11th of August. There were 36,000 medical, patients were taking treatment. Confirmed cases were 342,000. Deaths recorded within 24 hours is 124. I think yesterday it was around 156 or something. And this is how the things changed. You can see very well that by April, somewhere around April, mid of April, the dramatic increase of the cases, new cases, the incident rates went higher up. Day by day, the number of cases were increasing, and the spread, not confined to Western province, but also spreading to the other areas of the country, capturing whole country. There were no area to say that it is green. The whole country was red in the map. So health sector and the supply sector was mainly affected. The economy was shocking. They were shaked. The health sector was gone beyond the capacity of the health sector. So this is another view of that. But here I wanted to highlight that, if you can see, the number of cases increased in this manner, and without going to a plateau or to a manageable level, the numbers again escalated. So the daily cases were reporting as thousands, 3,000s. Now I am sure that it has gone to 5,000 or more per day, because there are a problem with data. We believe the number of cases reported is not the real numbers that is being identified. Due to various reasons, we believe that the numbers are less shown to the country. I don't say that it is done purposefully, but according to the way that the disease is behaving at the moment, we can predict that the numbers are much more higher. And also we know when a virus has a fast spreading strain or stronger strain, that strain take up the place and washed out the other strains, and it dominates the virus. So now if the Delta is taking place now, according to the new researchers, the experts predicts that Delta wave is taking place. It is dominating the cases now, caseloads. We have very limited options to see the strains now, but however, from the numbers that we have already tested for strains, the dominating number strain is the Delta strain. So therefore, Delta strain, we know its spreading is very high. The R0, the spreading rate is very high. It is 5-6 times more than the other strain. So we will see more and more cases in future than we see today. And at the same time, due to various reasons, and because of the characteristics of this strain, the mortality rates are going up. Most of the 30% of the patients who are getting infected, irrespective of the ages, are in need of oxygen. So in our hospitals, there are a lot of patients are in oxygen therapy, and they remain for long with oxygen. So therefore, the new patients who are coming who need oxygen, we have a crisis at the moment, not purely due to lack of oxygen. Oxygen supply still we maintain, but to give oxygen to the people, we need other equipments and facilities. So that is coming to a challenging situation. So this is how the death rates are going up. You can see the clear increase of death rates, and then daily death rates are escalating, and we have no control over deaths that's are happening in houses, because now the true situation is in many areas of Sri Lanka, basically mainly in including Western province, many patients are awaiting hospital admissions. They need hospital admissions, but due to unavailability of beds in the hospitals and difficulty in transporting patients, there are patients who stay at their home without any medical supervision or a treatment, just waiting to get a bed in a hospital. So that is a very dangerous situation, challenging situation, where we have to overcome somehow or other if we really want to control this situation which has arisen in Sri Lanka at the moment. And therefore, we'll have to carefully think and innovatively think how we can mitigate this situation. If we don't control this situation as a country, we might go into a very dangerous situation where the people of this country are in a trouble, and I don't know in such a situation whether we will be able to discuss about supply chain management or mitigation in supply chains. So therefore, we need to make sure that the COVID control itself has to be strengthened and streamlined immediately, with immediate effect, and control this situation as soon as possible if we really want to function as a country, function our economy. And as I heard one honorable speaker was talking about new normalcy. If we really want to adapt to the new normalcy, we really need to mitigate this condition. So in mitigations, it is important to remember these health guidelines. I'm not going to discuss all these things. Health guidelines are the key of this controlling mechanism. Why I say still in Sri Lanka, following the health guidelines is the key to control this disease or mitigate this disease at the moment. I'll tell you why. When this whole scenario started, May 2020, GMOA as a GMOA and many other professional organizations, we laid out an exit strategy where we comprehensively studied and showed that the way of controlling COVID in Sri Lanka, because we have to have a balcony view, we have to have fundamentals in this total scenario until we control COVID totally, including the world control. Because if this is a pandemic, we cannot control a disease alone. We have to take the situation as a whole and think of controlling along with the international community. So therefore, we have to work with WHO closely, follow their advisors because they gather all the informations and the data from all over the world. They see the trends. So we need to be with them closely. These are the mechanisms and or the strategies that we proposed at that time. Why I wanted to show that slide was to say that still those fundamentals remain as the key fundamentals to control this disease. One second. No. What is it? Yeah. So therefore now we have introduced this new system. We have to come out with new systems where we need to look after the patients, keeping them at home when the patient is safe to keep at home. So therefore we developed this strategy to keep the asymptomatic and symptomatic patients at home, and we developed a call center comprising of 500 odd doctors. Now we are increasing it to 1,000 to look after these patients over the phone and do admissions and necessary things if needed. So I'm not going to talk about this much. We have to adapt ourselves to new conditions, new situation, new environment. So therefore we need new normalcy or the dream concept to adapt even to our supply chain activities. Let me tell you a few things about vaccination. This will be very important. I'll take 2-3 minutes for that because everybody is thinking that vaccination will do the thing. Let me come out with little facts. We have so far received 19.5 million doses of vaccines, and we have given 13.75 million vaccine doses by now. 2.2 million people, that is 10% of our population, have received this both doses of vaccinations, and approximately 9.35 million, that is 40% of the population, have received the first dose of vaccines. We need another 13 million of vaccine doses if we really want to vaccinate 70% of the population in Sri Lanka who is above 18 years. Definitely we have to think about the 12 to 18 years as well if we really want to control this situation. So you can understand, if we are going to give 13 million of vaccines with the rate that we are going in a good rate, but even with this rate, if we are going to vaccinate, give this 13 million remaining doses that we need, it will take 43 to 55 days to complete this vaccination, vaccinating 13 million of doses. And once you give that both doses, it will take 3 to 4 weeks to develop the immunity. So therefore, rough calculation is it will take 73 to 88 days minimum to get the effectiveness of the vaccine of this 70% population. So then it's basically 3 months. So we'll have to struggle with COVID within this period if things happens things happens in a planned manner. So therefore the supply chain community must think about these things. The vaccine efficacy has to be considered. They are not 100% effective. Sri Lankan vaccination is going in a effective manner at the moment, but it will take a lot of time. There are WHO recommendations given for vaccinations, but we doubt that whether our vaccination programs are perfectly, following those advices. Therefore, we see a lot of shortcomings on that. So, as a responsible personals, we need to consider all these things when we think of supply chain management. So I just wanted to give an overview. I know my time is exceeding. So I just wanted to give these facts for you all to strategize and manage your activities in supply chain management activities. so that country can run until the COVID is being controlled or well mitigated. Thank you for giving me this opportunity. Over to you, moderator. So over to you.
Thank you, Dr. Samantha. You gave us a picture of the other side of the picture. Other side, I would say the other side of the picture, an insight into what's really going on. Waves of a different nature, clusters of different types. You said about the behavior of the virus. It is different to many other viruses that you had seen. From my age to yours, hasn't the behavior of the people also, human beings also have changed in no uncertain terms? I think nature is playing a different role on us. This last picture that I saw, responsibilities of the professionals. As professionals, we are opinion leaders. We have an onerous responsibility to play our role in no uncertain terms. Let us make sure that we do that to perfection to ensure that the future of Sri Lanka is assured. Thank you, Dr. Samantha, once again. Our next speaker is Mr. I.G. Pereira, an inventory controller, moving on to senior positions in supply chain management, procurement management, human resource management, quality management, production management, and lean management. What haven't you done? Looks as we have covered the entire sphere of management in this. Presently, he's a supply chain management consultant to a leading apparel group of companies and serves in the visiting faculties of Grain University, NSPM, Omagama University of Colombo, NIBM, ISMM, Meloda, University of Bedfordshire, University of Staffordshire, Convent University, UK, Birmingham City University, and University of Plymouth, UK, and RMIT, Australia. He is armed with an MBA on supply chain management and international business, majoring in MSc in supply chain management, MSc in project management, international diploma in supply chain management, and diplomas in the areas of computer systems design, business management, quality management, human resource management, marketing management, and purchasing and materials management. Mr. I.G. Pereira is also a fellow of the Institute of Supply and Materials Management and an accredited trainer of the International Trade Center, Geneva. He had been a past president of ISMM as well in 2019 to 2021 and serves in the Executive Council of the OPA. Mr. I.G. Pereira is the last speaker for the evening. I welcome you to make this presentation. Thank you. I lost it.
I think I can be heard well. Can you hear me well?
Yes.
Mr. Kalage, can you hear me well?
Yeah, please go ahead.
Yeah, okay. Thank you very much. And thank you very much for the introduction. And I must thank at the beginning Mr. Gamage for inviting me for this particular timely seminar, and also OPA for conducting this kind of timely seminars always. And some of the things, the concepts which I'm going to present have been already discussed. I'm taking the last mile. Hope you can see the presentation. Can you see the presentation, please?
You can see a picture for the time being. We can see a picture with the backdrop.
Right, thank you. So I'm not wasting time to explain what the supply chain is. It has been discussed already. I would say it's a network of organizations with a focused network to serve a purpose in the market, to meet the demand in the market. In short, the flows of supply chain, so materials and resources, information, funds, and technology. So any supply chain starts with the nature and ends with the nature. So it's from the womb to the tomb, from the nature to the nature. As to see the presented, 94% of the 1,000 companies of Fortune, 1,000 companies affected, 75% negatively, and 55% and to downgrade. Supply chain projected reductions in imports by sector-wise, 38 billion into the United States, 46 billion in Europe, and 42 billion in China. There is a tidal wave of bankruptcies from Hertz to JCPenney to Virgins to Interlast to J.Crew to Whiting to and ARV. So there's a tidal wave of bankruptcies coming in. And a lot of disruptions. Availability of material and resources, pricing, business closures, limiting facilities and space in warehouses, customer queries not being met, and logistical issues. We face all these issues in Sri Lanka. And in that respect, internally in organizations, we have issues with production planning and inventory control, supplies, and internal logistics. So we are disrupted. Material resources, funds, information, value additions, and innovation. What are the challenges? Big ones, supply chain resiliency. Only 21% of the companies are resilient. And operations are becoming more costly. You understand today, pre-COVID era, $800 to $9,000 a container from China to Colombo has been increased to $3,000 to $4,000 today. As a result, many commodities in the local market have been priced up. Issues in sustainability. People, planet, and profit, 3 Ps. You may be looking after people in the organization, but you may not be looking after the planet or the environment. Then the organization will not be bearable. You may be looking after people, but not be making profits. It will not be equitable. You may be looking after the environment and the profit, but then the environment will not be viable. For you to be a sustainable organization, you need to look after people, look after the environment, and earn profits. And this is an issue today with this issue. Supply chain talent. Whatever the field you are in, the skill set. The fourth Gatha in Dhammapada explains the discipline. Bahu saccanta sippancha vinayocha susikkito subhasita jaya vacha eta mangalamuttam. Bahu saccanta sippancha bahusrita vennona, skill vennona, silpe danaganna ona, vinaya tiyenna ona. Then only it will be subhasita vacha, otherwise it will be just vacha, vacha, vacha. Another challenge, flexibility, as our friend Mr. Jude explains, the flexibility and agility. And we have issues today. Some of our supply chains, our vendors, our suppliers are not flexible. Our social strategies are not flexible. And our transportation distribution systems are not flexible. We have issues, challenges. IT sector has a better time with COVID, but at the same time, you can see the growth of their profits. But at the other side then, it's a cost to the companies, non-IT companies. It's a rising cost. That's a challenge. What do we do then? Put people first. Leverage data to improve visibility. Define segmentation to prioritize the demand. As Jude explains, build sales and operations teams and evaluate the scenarios. Whatever said and done, let me ask this question. How many of your friends who are non-supply chain professionals knew about supply chains in the pre-COVID era. Today, what is the situation? Everybody knows what is supply chain, and everybody, those who did not order things online are experts in ordering things today online. Even after COVID, 59% of the people prefer to work from home. So employees first then. As our doctor explains, ensure our employees are safe.
Mr. Perra, we have a slight issue, sorry to interrupt, but your slides are not visible to many of the participants. Could you please recheck on the slides?
Can you see it now, please?
It's being shared from the host point. I see. I get it on my screen. I'll recheck. Please.
Now we can see.
I can see it.
Thank you. Sorry about it.
Okay, thank you. So the people first then. That is what we should be adapting. Quick access to medical care and support. Ensure no workplace transmissions, and some of the multinationals, even in Sri Lanka, if you attend a wedding, if you attend a funeral, you have to self-quarantine for 14 days before you return to work. And you are not called for any meetings physically. And they look after you. They give you all the facilities to work from home. If you require even the workstation, they will provide facilities and react with care. Put people to first. If you get these talented people, skilled people, experienced people in the organizations, if you get resignations, what would happen at this moment? Of course, there is some surplus labor in the market, but will you be able to find the right fit? Definitely it will be costly and it will be an issue. So therefore, look after your people. And give me a minute. Serve customers through the supply chain.
Mr. IG, sorry for troubling. Mr. IG.
Yes. Yeah.
Still, it's not sharing. Can you please share the presentation?
I have shared it, and let me share it again then.
Yeah.
You can't see it on the screen.
Can you share it? Can you see it
now? Okay. Now okay.
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 So serve the customers through the supply chain. You know, as supply chain professionals, we know any supplier will be a customer to somebody. Any organization will be playing this dual role. Anybody will be a supplier and a customer to somebody. So look after the customer. As a raw material supplier, ensure materials are available with your customer. Ensure labor is there. Ensure you are matching the demand. It can be the manufacturer, it can be the distributor, it can be the retailer, or it can be even the consumer. Ensure the availability. And as Jude explains, resilient supply chains. You saw only 21% of the Fortune 1000 companies are resilient, 100% resilient to this particular issue. So 80% of, roughly 80% of the companies are not resilient. Obviously, we have a lot of issues then in the supply chain. So understanding as a supply base, collaborative efforts in planning and supplying, board level responsibility taking, continuity, and as Jude explains, agility. Supply chain re-engineering, collaboration, and developing a risk management culture. So develop resilience in supply chains. Hope you can see. So leverage data to improve the visibility. So this is widely talked, but at grassroots level, you must be having a lot of data. Think whether you are using this data to the required degree, whether you are collecting the data in the right format, whether you are having database management in place in a disciplined manner. You analyzing data, no point having data management and data warehousing if you are not going to use, if you are not going to analyze, if you are not developing predictive models for your business, for the supply chains. So leverage data and define segmentation. You can't take everything as a whole. The market should be segmented, and each segment then can be handled easily. As our doctor explains, health sector separate is you are segmenting the health sector. Even the health sector you are segmenting. Today we are faced with an issue with oxygen. We are faced with an oxygen issue with how to vaccinate the total required population. And segment, set the targets for each segment and position yourself. So build your brand to best meet their needs and to face the challenge. So define segmentation. Build sales and operational teams. This was discussed by our friend Jude. In pre-COVID era, in the organizations, you must have a lot of departments. I'm in the personal department, I'm in the finance department, I'm in the IT department, I'm in the production department, because we are the heart of the operations. But it is high time to think that you are a part of the process. Nobody is higher and lower. Everybody has to contribute towards the process to meet the end target. Everybody's service is valued. Everybody is part of the process. So high time to think that you are part of the process. You are not belongs to a particular department. So departmentalization is a virus today. So therefore you have to team up, build your teams in maybe engineering, project management, whatever the area, whatever the disciplines you are into, but you are part of the process, meeting the demands of the general public or the customer. Scenario planning has been touched. So build based on the data once you analyze, build on scenarios. Build on scenarios, and it will be easier than to draw up action plans. Build on scenarios. Another aspect, outsourcing. Use it as a strategy. In Sri Lanka, we have got quite a few 3PLs, third-party logistics organizations. Third party is in between the first party and the second party. First party is the producer. Second party is the carrier. So you are in between. Or you are in between the carrier and the customer. So you are a 3PL. So use 3PL operations, logistics, warehousing. And if possible, so you don't have many 4PLs in Sri Lanka, fourth party logistics organizations, which controls the total supply chain. Example is the only 4PL operating in Sri Lanka is Accenture, joint venture with Brandix, and they are controlling the total supply chain. And people are thinking now about 10PLs as well, 100% digitized world of the supply chain. What benefits you would get? The survey says by using 3PLs and outsourcing as a cost-cutting tool. Of course, yes. I have experience by outsourcing many functions in different organizations and leveraging the cost benefits for the organizations. And not only you reduce cost, and it will free you from a lot of non-value adding functions like logistics function. I'm not referring to conversion. Of course, those logistics, transportation, warehousing, all those are value adding today. But when you are freed from these functions, you have a lot of time to focus on your core area, your production, your quality, your design, your innovation. And it will solve a lot of capacity issues. You don't have enough space in your warehouse, we outsource. It will create capacities. It will enhance the service quality. And 28% says critical to business needs. And you will derive these benefits at this moment by outsourcing. Another area, leverage reverse logistics. Reverse logistics, what is reverse logistics? Moving resources from the point of use to point of origin. Again, from moving resources from point of origin to point of consumption is logistics. The reversed, moving resources from the point of use to point of consumption, point of origin. So it can be inbound logistics, outbound logistics, and it will benefit, you will benefit out of it. Why? Because at the moment we have an issue with raw material sources. With reverse logistics, you will have access to some of the raw material sources which are recycled or reused. So develop business to business. Maybe you have different dimensions of reverse logistics. It can be reused, it can be recycled. So whatever the strategy, leverage on reverse logistics. And this has been touched by other speakers, digitization and digitalization. What is digitization? You must be having the old film roll camera at home. You're not using it. You can't be used. It has been already obsolete, gone obsolete. But it has been digitized to a digital camera and it is incorporated in your phone. I don't think anybody is there today without using your phone, without taking a selfie. And you are using the digitized technology for the benefit of your day-to-day life. That is digitalization. You use digitalization. The largest taxi company doesn't have any taxi. The largest accommodation provider doesn't have any rooms. And I can continue with the list. What do they use? Digitalization to provide the services. So from the nature to the nature, if you can digitalize. At the beginning of COVID, we all went through a lot of hardships at our port. We could not trace the shipments, inbound shipments. It took sometimes days and days to trace your cargo. If we had digitalized system within no time, we could have traced the shipments. And we are happy at least now they have taken some steps for digitalization, but it takes considerable length of time. Pre-COVID, so many years back, it was totally manual. Now today with a click, you can process your cost deck, you can process your port operations, somewhat some relief. And develop circular supply chains. This will again have a link to reverse logistics. And this will ease the sourcing of components and raw materials as well. The used materials you manufacture and finally you consume and you get the recycling or reusing into your supply chain. You drink your Coke and finally you return the empty bottle and it will get refilled and comes back to you. So how much of components, materials are recycled? Develop circular supply chains, and this will be a part of circular economies as well at macro level. And it should be a case with each and every business director, business manager, continuous improvement. Whatever the designation, irrespective of your designation, one of your prime jobs should be think about the continuous improvement. That's what Dr. Demin said. Irrespective of your designation, you should be a manager of continuous improvement. Any manager. You should be able to improve your area daily, continuously. And you must be gathering a lot of data. Today, any business, you have a lot of volumes, high speed, and varying degrees of data coming to your databases. Some are structured, some are unstructured, some sensor-driven, new data types, totally new. How many of our organizations are using this data to develop scenarios, to develop predictive models? And successful companies today, the first efforts made by 7-Eleven, the Japanese organization, to do Walmart today, almost all the organizations, all the hospitals, software companies, Google, whatever the companies you name today, this is a very important issue, area that they have embarked on. And last but not least, innovate and automate. So innovation is the name of the game. At the end of the day, people should be creative. It can be technical dimension, it can be learning, or it can be organization, it can be management, it can be any area. You should be able to innovate. Then this is a high time that innovation should be playing a key role. Without, if everybody, all the laboratories were keeping silent without inventing a vaccine, what would have happened by now? Thanks to these few vaccines, many people are surviving today. So innovation cannot be forgotten. Finally, we have received an object lesson in how to cope with uncertainty, not by striving for control, but by developing resilience, wisdom, creativity, inclusion, and diversity. Thank you very much. Over to Juan Galagi.
Thank you, Ms. Perra. That was quite revealing, and we learned a lot from you, from your presentation. Thank you. A tidal wave of bankruptcies worldwide. Only 21% of the Fortune 500 companies resilient. The 3 Ps, people, planet, and profit, should work in complete harmony. Develop resilience, build on themes, plan on scenarios, innovate, and look at the new normal situation. Thank you very much for your presentation, and we are really indebted to you for the wonderful presentation. Thank you very much. So we move on to the most vibrant arena. Normally we have at OPA, at physical sessions. We have these sessions I mean, they are wonderful in the sense that the exchange of views, the questions, it's very invigorating. So it's time for questions. And the erudite panel is here with us to answer your queries. It's time for the participants to play a role during this evening. See that whatever the issues that you have in mind, you can put it across. I have got some SMSs with me, which I come across. People knowing me had sent me some SMSs, but I'll wait for the participants to respond.
So I have a question to the panel. Now, before the pandemic, we discuss about and we focus about this lean supply chain and agile supply chain, right? Then after this pandemic, this lean supply chain and the agile supply chain is really challenging at the moment. So how we focus about the lean concepts and the agile concepts in this pandemic? So that is my question.
This item, Mr. Pereira could answer this query.
Yes, actually he's right. So we were implementing lean. It was a buzzword, and we were implementing lean in many organizations, even in Sri Lanka. But what is lean actually? Lean is eliminating waste. There are already about 35 different types of waste identified. And you have a very systematic mechanism of eliminating waste one by one. So one of the waste is inventory. So inventory is considered as a waste. So when you implement lean, to get rid of unwanted inventories, if possible, on time, just-in-time systems. But with pandemic, what happens, the organizations who had implemented lean had a disruption of supplies. So the raw material suppliers, component suppliers had issues due to the issue COVID, and they could not. Now the lean is 100% aligned to the market demand, meeting the demand. But what happens when you are disrupted with raw material supplies, you could not meet the demand. But the argument is, if we had some stocks of raw material and components, we could have survived at least for a short time. So that's a fact. But with post-pandemic situations, when things are normal, when the supply chains are streamlined, I hope you should not be continuing with waste again. So it's a program that should not be forgotten. We should be again aligned to the needs of the demand and without creating waste in the pipelines. Of course, agility, yes, but these are two different concepts. When you want the agility and the flexibility in the organizations, first of all, you should decide what kind of organizations you can implement lean. In the apparel industry, if you are a fashion design, if you are a fashion garment, if you are designing, if you are manufacturing, we normally exclude those areas from lean because to cater to the demands of the fashion industry, it's a requirement that you have to have some amount of raw material stocks, inventories you need to manage. So therefore, the industries which run smoothly, stable, are preferred for implementation of lean. I hope I answered the question.
Thank you, Mr. Pera. I hope the Pera is responded positively. Any more questions from the participants? Well, I've got this question from Mr. Tusit Gunavarna Surya. You mentioned about import substitution. What is the way forward on this? I mean, have any positive steps being taken with regard to import substitution? Mr. Tushit Gunavarna Surya, are you there? Mr. Gunavarna Surya, I hope you heard me. Well,
hi, Mr. Galage, are you able to hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you very well. Thank you.
Right. Okay, so there are several industries which already went for localization. Now you can see that in the farming space as well. If you look at the turmeric, now from importation to we have gone for localization, national supply chains. So there are several industries which is looking at more value addition locally. Even cement industry is another example. So I think what needs to happen, first of all, the government policy needs to be consistent. So unless the government policy is consistent, no one is going to invest in local capacities. So that is very important. Then the infrastructure and the policy framework, let's say labor, facilities, that has to be clear. So if that is there, I'm sure there will be investors, there will be organizations who go for higher local value addition and localization of certain supply chain industries.
Thank you. From the participants, are there any other questions?
Mr. Galage, I can see a question on the chat.
What?
It says, depending on high leverage on outsourcing, will the control goes out of your hand? If so, it may damage your image. How you manage that? Can I answer the question?
Most certainly. Thank you for playing my role for a moment. Thank you.
So, you're welcome. So actually, now, in some situations, as the person who asked the question may be right. with my experience, I have handled quite a few outsourcing operations. The main role when you try to outsource or you are looking for a 3PL or 4PL, you have to select a partner very carefully. Otherwise, you will face some of these pitfalls. Of course, yes, to find the last mile control, sometimes you will be losing. For instance, if you are outsourcing the packing operation to a 3PL, the operators and the supervisors of 3PL operation will not know the real requirements of the customer, end customer. So they don't have the touch. But when you are selecting the partner and when you are handing over the operations to the 3PL, you have to be very careful. So what we do normally is you select the partner very carefully and you train people, you give them extensive training in terms of the system, discipline, and all angles of the business, and you test them. I have even given examinations. Those who have earned 90 and above only are authorized and licensed to do outsourcing operations. Thereby you ensure that everybody knows the job. Otherwise, it will be leading to this kind of situations. We have done many outsourcing operations very successfully without having this kind of pitfalls. The name of the game is how to select your partner, how to train them, and how to license them, how to approve them, and how to set the operations with well-disciplined SOPs. So standard operation procedures, everybody should be given and tested. I hope I answered the question.
Thank you, Mr. Pera. Ms. Samarnayaka, I hope your question is responded positively. Thank you. The participants, are there any questions that you would like to fire off at this moment? Well, I have a question for Mr. Jude Fernando. You specifically said that it's only about 10% is locally manufactured as far as pharmaceuticals go. Is there any positive outlook with regard to improving this this quantum which is manufactured in Sri Lanka?
Yes, there are. In fact, there is a plan by the government to improve this significantly. In fact, there are a lot of groundwork already happened. There are areas dedicated for pharmaceutical industry. There are a lot of incentives given. So in fact, there is a big plan to improve the dependency of import, at least when it comes to generic, basic generic medicine, so that, Sri Lanka, we will have our own medicine in the long run. So they have a very ambitious plan of having it in 4 years to have, 40-50%, for 30-40% of our generics being self-sufficient. Those are good ambitions to have. But I mean, even if you fall short of that, meeting that target, if you're on the right direction of having locally manufactured product, that certainly sounds good for the country. There are certainly plans in that direction. You're on mute. Mr. Galegi, you're on mute.
Thank you, Mr. Jude Fernando. I think that's very good news to Sri Lanka and all Sri Lankans. Thank you. I think, are there any other questions from the participants?
I have a question. My name is Leelanda Subasinghe, representing ISMM. We saw some facts during the presentation of Mr. Tusit Gunasurya regarding the increasing of profitability of some businesses during the COVID period. One is the health sector and the data communication likewise. So my question is to Dr. Samantha. Now, Doctor, as we know, the health sector products and everything is increase the profitability. So still the antigen test and PCR test likewise, those things still expensive in Sri Lanka. So what is your suggestion to do as a, I mean, to suggest to government to reduce the prices for these tests. Still, it's I mean, for the ordinary people, it's a high price. Just my idea, and I want to get some idea from Dr. Samantha.
Dr. Samantha, there's a question for you. Dr. Samantha, are you there with us?
Yes, I'm there.
There's a question.
I didn't hear you. I'm very sorry about it.
The gentleman who spoke, can you repeat the question, please?
Dr. Samantha, my name is Leland Singha. I'm representing ISMM.
Yes.
Yeah, my question actually, I saw some during the presentation of Mr. Tusit Guruan Surya, there are some fields like health sector, the business profitability is increased during the COVID period. So, but still the antigen test, PCR, those kind of products expensive in this country. So, what is your suggestion in this regard?
Yeah, now PCR cost is in the private sector. If you take PCR cost in government sector, it's around 4,000 rupees. Outside in private hospitals, now we have put maximum price saying is 6,500. So the private sector has to play with this 2,500 rupees. I don't know how practical it is to reduce this 6,500 rupees further down, because in the world market, the PCR test is costly. That is why we brought, in the expert panels with the virologist and epidemiologist, everybody got together and we discussed and went for the option of rapid antigen test, RAT test, which is very cheap compared to PCR. So therefore, it is always good to combine this when we see it from the general public of side. In their point of view, it is to make it cheap. We have to more promote RAT test together with isolation and quarantine procedures, so that we can reduce the cost that we are spending as a country for this testing procedures. Otherwise, if we really want to be real time and moderate or advanced level of testing procedures, then of course PCR testing is the best, which is very costly. So according to the world market prices, I don't know how far it is realistic that we can reduce these prices. That is why government is at the moment shifting from PCR to RAT test, rapid antigen test. So I think as a country with our economic problems, this is the optimum testing strategy that we can play at the moment.
Dr. Samantha, I have a question for you, which has come across to me.
Yes, sir.
Says that you spoke about the Nibia cluster. It happened in April. How come the sudden spike in July, which really sort of took the whole country into a shock syndrome? What is the reason for it? And then your comment on the pandemic versus the vaccine.
Yes.
Where are we heading?
Yes. So actually, if we really seeing about a better control of this COVID situation, where the economy can run, we have to think about from the economical point of view, sir. As medical professionals, we do understand that continuing the economical activities are important. So therefore, if we really wants to continue the economic activities and keep the country's economy running, of course, we have to go for the vaccination procedure. Vaccination is the key to run the economy. But if we are thinking about vaccinating the country and making the country to run in the new normalcy, then of course our vaccination efficiency and the strategy should be focused on economic perspectives. That is why vaccinating the population, the cohort that is actively involved in economic activities, such as garment factory employees and other industrial employees and vulnerable employees, like other service providers which are essential, not only the essential services but also the essential activities which is facilitating the economic activities should also be considered in this vaccination program. So therefore, the vaccination is the key. Spending on vaccination as a country is worth, but I told you the timeline quickly. It will be, even if we go in this efficiency, which is now we are doing a reasonable, significant number of vaccinations per day involved in the health sector. Even though if we go in this rate, it will take 3 to 4 months to achieve the desired level of vaccination. Unfortunately, the vaccination itself has not helped. When we go to the international scenarios and explore, the number of cases are still increasing. Though the mortality rate, the deaths are reducing, the cases are increasing. But those countries, now the economy is running because of the vaccination. So I think as professionals, we must push the government to go for better vaccination program and spend on that. So the first question that you asked, I'll give a short answer. You wanted to know this how this April, the Aurudu Pokura, how it increased. It multiplied, sir. The number that we test and see is not the actual number which is in the community. It is predicted by WHO the 5 times the numbers, the actual number is 5 times the tested number. And with regards to the this new variant, it is 7 to 8 times the actual number. So you can imagine how many COVID patients are in the community who are not really tested. Now a lot of our MOHs are doing community samples, random samples. We have shocking results. More than 30-40% are getting positive with random samples. That is, we are not, they are not suspected people. They are normal people as us, but they become positive. In my hospital, I can share this, the last point that I want to highlight. In my hospital, when we bring patients for other purposes, like other illnesses, we usually check them before surgeries and other things. 30%, nearly 30% of them getting positive, who has no symptoms whatsoever, but has come for some other illnesses. So this is the true situation in the country, in the community at the moment. We are in alert 4 level. So it is a bit of a dangerous situation. So this, because of this R naught, the multiplication number, we have increased this New Year bubble has exploded and spreading the things all over the country.
Thank you, Doctor. I see a hand raised. Mr. Bayar Karunaratna, I was wondering why you're so silent all this time. Mr. Bayar Karunaratna, your hand is raised. You can raise your question as well.
All right. Now, can you hear me, please?
Yes, we can hear you. Please go ahead.
My question is a follow-up question from what the past president, Mr. Gallagher, asked. That is, we would like to see more production of these drugs in Sri Lanka, and why he asked why it's not why it's not increasing. Now, I'd like to know the people who undertake to produce such drugs, whether they can be competitive, whether they can produce these drugs at prices compared to the imported one from India, because in the case of drugs, you can't increase the price to stop import, because it's unlike in electrical and other luxury items, it's quite different. So we should be able to produce these drugs at those prices. Is that an impediment for our entrepreneurs or companies to produce drugs locally?
Okay, great question. Let me answer that. So there are different types of, see, as you quite rightly said, certain medicines are very difficult for us to, not only the cost, including the technology, material availability, there are a whole lot of stuff that makes it impossible for a country like ours to do that. But at the same time, there are generic basic drugs, which is the, most of our hospital use them in bulk. And those are the medicines that our hospitals buy from tenders. What we need to do, in fact, what the direction of the government is also, is to produce those ones. Now, these products, which is mass scale product, basic drugs, can be produced in this country, at least to ensure that the government purchases are done through them, which is a bulk purchase, mind you. And through that, once that is fulfilled, it can even come to the private sector. These are not specialized drugs for sure. These are the basic drugs which can be easily produced without too much of a complication. Well, it's good if we can export, but it's best at least if we can manage our internal requirement through these production processes, which can be managed, as I said, as long as those are basic drugs which are in use without not having a very complicated technology or processes involved.
Thank you. I think it's time for us to bring the curtain down on this webinar. And I take pleasure in inviting the first ever lady General Secretary of the OPA, Attorney at Law, Ms. Ruchira Gunasekaran. Before I wind up, what should I say? Wasamata Udisarnai Depitai, God bless you. Take care and stay safe. Thank you very much. Ms. Ruchira Gunasekaran.
Thank you, sir. Ladies and gentlemen, a very good evening to all of you. On behalf of the Organization of Professional Associations of Sri Lanka, at the outset, our sincere thanks to the eminent panelists, Mr. Thusit Gunawarnasuriya, Director Procurement and Logistics, Siam City Cement Lanka Limited, Mr. Jude Fernando, Managing Director, Hemas Pharmaceuticals Private Limited, Dr. Samantha Ananda, Assistant Secretary of the Government Medical Officers Association, Mr. I.G. Pereira, Immediate Past President of Institute of Supply and Materials Management, for their participation, despite their very busy schedules, even from home, they have really given their valuable input and making valuable presentation on this important webinar on strategies on supply chain to mitigate the impact of COVID-19. And once again, thank you for sharing their knowledge and insights with us. We appreciate the efforts of Mr. Sarath Gamage, Vice President, and the Chairman of the Supply Chain, the Logistics and Transport Committee of the OPA, and the members of the committee in organizing this webinar. This is a very important event initiated by them under their committee. Thank you for all the hard work. We are thankful to all the participants who are present here physically, as well as for the online participants, for not only for their patience and for their interaction and for their contribution in asking these questions. which made this webinar a great success. Our sincere thanks to Mr. Ruan Galage, Honorary Past President, for his contribution as the moderator, and of course for his eloquent comparing this evening. Thank you, sir, for all your contribution and input for this webinar. On behalf of the chairman and the members of the Supply Chain, Logistics and Transport Committee, we wanted to convey to all the eminent panelists and the moderator that in appreciating their contribution to appreciate their contribution, they have made all the arrangements to deliver, in fact, to their doorsteps the token of appreciation. But as they said, this, as you can understand, we would have loved if we could have wanted to have them physically here in OPA. Due to the situation, they have really come, but still we want to appreciate. Thank you once again. So they will be making all the arrangements to deliver this tokens of appreciation to you. And I want to thank our President, Engineer Shanta Senrat, President-elect, Mr. Dulita Pereira, Treasurer, Mr. Bandura Gamarachi, Chairman and Chairperson of the Standing Committees, past presidents, members of the Executive Council, and the Forum for their advice and support in organizing this webinar. I appreciate, as always, the hard work of the OPA Secretariat staff, headed by Mr. D.M. Saniratna. And also, especially, I want to thank all the members who supported it technically, Mr. Nilanga and his team in organizing this webinar. Thank you to all of you once again. Good night.
Thank you.
All the best. Stay safe, everyone.
All the best. Take care.
Thank you. Thank you very much.